Coffee stain badge on a lanyard string. Hotel ballroom, buzzing, fluorescent wings. Name tags, crooked inside jokes. We live on acronyms and conference notes. Late night panels, early flights, still swapping war stories under dim lights. If the world goes sideways, who they gonna call? The weirdo taking roll in the expo hall. I am talks tonight. Yeah, we laugh so we don't lose our minds. Blue skies days to the worst headline. We're the ones still on the run. I am talks tonight.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at. And I'm excited today to have, a special guest. We have Jeremy Greenberg, who has led FEMA's National Response Coordination Center, the NRCC, as you will, as the Director of Response Operations from 2020 until his departure from the agency in 2025. And if you have not been in that building, the NRCC is where federal response is coordinated on the country's worst days. And he's directed FEMA's Response Operations Division, which, includes the National Watch Center, the FEMA Operations Center, and the National Urban Search and Rescue Program. A lot of stuff right there. He's also served as FEMA's team leader for the Domestic Emergency Support Team. Before FEMA, he had a life. He ran the Department of Transportation's National Response Program and served as the deputy manager of DOT's Crisis Management Center. More than 23 years of federal service, 5 of them and the senior executive services. So today, he is the president of Provincial Strategies, and he teaches at the University of Chicago's Threat and Risk Management Program. And, relevant to our conversation, he serves as the senior advisor to the Aspen Digital, which is a partner of the same as the AIDE initiative that's commissioned to do the research that we are going to discuss today. So he has seen this problem, from both sides, from the top of the federal government response structure, and is now working from the outside here, and excited to have him here. Jeremy, welcome to IAEM Talks.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, so, couple things. We all know about AI, things that are happening within AI, but what drove this research?
A couple things. So let's talk a little bit about the history of what we're going to chat about. So AIDE, the Artificial Intelligence and Disasters and Emergency Initiative. The Markle Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization, started looking at their next project. They do a variety of projects every 5 years. Started looking about 2 years ago to figure out what their next project was going to be. And if you and I, we've talked about this a little bit, but if everybody's listening, just take a step back and think about where the world was 2 years ago, where technology was, where disaster response was. And Marco started doing some independent research talking about the next opportunity. And if you think about two arcs happening simultaneously, you have the increase of disaster response requirements. Natural disasters are increasing in frequency and intensity. Everybody listening to this program knows that. We have demand in the emergency management community, not just in sort of quote unquote normal response requirements, but mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery. So arc 1, and then arc 2 is this technology advancing called artificial intelligence. And we can get into it a little bit later, but more broadly, to encompass everything that's in the AI space. And these two lines were starting to intersect at a point where Markle identified an opportunity. So they partnered with Aspen Digital, which is a program within the Aspen Institute, and RAND to commission some research and figure out what is going on in emergency management today. Where are we seeing adoption of artificial intelligence? Where are we seeing barriers to that adoption? And tasked Aspen Digital side to go in and convene some workshops, bring together practitioners to ask questions and answer in a series of not escalating complexity, but series of follow-on questions, right? So workshop 1 leads to workshop 2. We've all been part of these. At the same time, our colleagues over at RAND doing some deeper research on systems that exist, tools and technologies. They evaluated about 1,800 different technologies that can benefit the emergency management community, not just EM tools directly, but broader adoption capability tools, and looked at it and figure out, hey, where are we seeing these tools in play? What might they be? And all of that bulked in together is kind of where we are. I don't want to go too far and bore everyone listening, but that's sort of the genesis of the AIDE initiative.
So, full disclosure, I'll be taking those workshops. We have 4 of them that are going to be online, virtually here. We're going through LA County, and we're also looking to bring those workshops back to my jurisdiction in person. So, those workshops I think are critical. And I don't know if you know, like the process of it, but I'd like to kind of put that out there. I was like, how do people get involved with getting those workshops, or at least taking them?
Yeah. So let me clarify a couple things. So one, the workshops that I was referencing at the beginning were sort of the phase 1, if you will, of where we were going out and interviewing emergency managers, technologists, practitioners, academics to lay the foundation for our research and reports. What you're talking about, and this awesome segue, is the after part, right? So phase 1, do the research. Rand and Aspen do the research. 3 reports were just released this week.
Yes.
The RAND report that talked about the technologies, the Aspen reports that summarizes the findings from the workshops, and then the overall AIDE report that talks broadly about the findings of the 2, but then really highlights where we're going with this initiative. And Todd, you just brought up one of the key, there's 6 things that we're working on towards the next step. So one is these education programs that you're talking about, virtually delivered at the beginning and then hopefully in person in jurisdictions to really train on large language model usage in emergency management. One of the things throughout our careers, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you'll probably nod your head one way or another, is emergency managers by nature are either way too busy to learn something new, have tried it and it's failed, or they knew a guy or gal who did it and they didn't like it, right? So this is to disrupt that theory a little bit, right? So some partnering up technologists and emergency managers to get into jurisdictions and talk through and translate a little bit about, what are you using, why are you using it, how are you using it, dispel some of the rumors. So those are the education programs you're talking about. I'm excited to hear that you're gonna be in one. And if people are interested in having that tailored to your jurisdiction, either virtually or delivered to your jurisdiction, either virtually or physically, aideinitiative.org, just go on there and fill out the form and explicitly say that you're interested in that. So that's part 1. We're doing those. And then we have a summit coming up in September 8th and 9th in Austin, Texas. And an absolute plug to emergency managers that are listening to this podcast, if you don't mind, shameless plug. This is an opportunity where we're bringing together technologists, academics, practitioners in the EM space, tech companies that we know are focused in emergency management, some that are just broader. And the intent is to jumpstart this conversation. We know every meeting you're in, the term AI comes up. We know that people have reactions, but really to bring everybody together and have that go. I was joking with a colleague that it's either going to be this awesome cross-section discussion or it's the Star Wars bar where everybody kind of hangs out by themselves. So our goal is obviously the good cross-section discussion. So if anyone's listening and you want to find out more about the summit, please hit the website as well. So you got the education, you've got the summit coming up. We're going to release our first iteration of what we're referring to as the AI playbook. Every emergency manager loves a playbook. The goal is to, and we heard this throughout the workshops, was I don't have time to go assess this. Give me something I can follow, a color by numbers chart, and it's not to insult anyone. It's just to de-risk for the EM community that's overburdened already of, hey, here are some things to think about. These are barriers and hurdles, or these are gates that you should pass through. So a playbook coming out. And then the last 2 things I want to highlight. One is, and we'll be talking about this at the summit, is capacity building pilots, where we can actually physically deploy people to jurisdictions to integrate into their existing tech This is not a sales pitch. We're not selling anything, but what do you have already? How are you using it? Do a deeper dive on your SOPs and your processes to figure out, are there ways that you can actually build capacity by leveraging some of the AI tools that Jessica and the team at RAND have identified. And then lastly, Marco has been generous enough to look at funding some research opportunities in the academic community. We know there's this sort of valley of death, and I'm stealing that line from Jessica Jensen because I love it, is research happens and then the application never really takes off. So
Right.
why is it that the academic community doesn't translate to the EM side? And there's a variety of very good reasons, not a criticism. So can we fund some of these research projects that have more opportunity and a higher stake of coming to fruition?
I want to get into that in a second here, but
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about AI first. And so it's really interesting to see this debate going all over the place when it comes to AI, whether it's in academics, whether it's in emergency management. You create these documents, whatever it would be, your EAP, your IAP, your whatever P, right? And you can utilize AI, and even our incident management software programs are having AI systems built into it to help with that. The way I see AI, and this is just my take on it at least, is it helps with the mundane things that are routine, that aren't critical. What I mean by critical, like you can just say, but it helps you make decisions faster. That's the way I see AI working. Now, I've heard other emergency managers that reject it completely, that are just like, shouldn't be in our thing. There's security risks. There's all this stuff happening. I'm going to put it this way. Number one, it's not going anywhere, right? It's going to be part of our vernacular. It's who we are. We are not obviously AI natives, right? Or the next generation. When I say next generation, our children's children will, I give a thumbs up for some reason, our children's children will be AI natives, right? We're realistically in learning, we're in language models, right? It's not even true AI. It just helps us, make words, right? How do you see AI being integrated into emergency management? And then how do we cross that bridge between the old guys like myself and this next generation that's going to be coming up behind, probably even this generation that's currently emergency managers?
How much time we got in the podcast?
1 minute.
So, oh man, that's an awesome question. It's so many different angles. Let me hit on a few and then come back with a question. So one, I'm going to use me as an example. I love technology. I have often been teased as not the guy you go to ask a technology question. I'll say it that way, right? So I'm a user, but I am not going to be a cutting edge person who's like, oh, the best, latest, greatest technology. I just want to put some context there. Two, we can talk about, and we should talk about, the large language models and the as you get on and hey, you put something in a system, you get something back, and where that really can help emergency managers, because I think it's critical. But I do want to flag one thing, and this was, I've been working this project for about a year, and I admittedly, when someone said AI to me, I immediately went to, and this was a year ago, so Chat, Gemini, or Claude, right? It was just, those were things I associate. There's so much more, right?
Mhm.
The predictive analytics, the drone vision capability, the computer vision capability, all of the things, and a lot of these tools that we're using day in and day out, and you just don't know. So when someone says, well, I don't like AI, take a beat, think about it, right? Did you wake up this morning and look at the Weather Channel? Yes. Okay, then you've already interacted with AI. Did you read a news feed that was curated to your desire? Right? All of these things, they are happening and empowered by artificial intelligence technology. So I think there's a discussion that needs to be had for sure about all of the other tools in the AI suite and how we're using them. When I was over at FEMA, had the truly distinct pleasure of overseeing the National Urban Search and Rescue System. Those guys and gals are amazing, right? The technology that they leverage to go do search operations, technical search in a specific area, wide area search. We could do a whole podcast on the technology there. But bring it back to your question about, like, how do I use it and what do I use it for? One, there are risks. Right? There are risks with every single piece of technology that we use. There's risks with my notebook and my pen, right? I could run out of ink. So I don't want to poo-poo that and say we should not look at it, but that's where good policy and good structure comes into place. And in the emergency management jurisdictions that we've interviewed where great progress is being made, and it's not size and scope, interestingly, it's not the bigger ones are better. It's where people have embraced the concept of a chief innovation officer or a chief adoption officer or a chief AI officer. CTOs, chief technology officers, and CISOs, the chief security officers, they're looking at system protection, right? It just makes sense. So it's easy when you say, no, you can't do that. We were talking earlier, we're both firefighters by background. If I build a house out of concrete, it will likely not burn, right? There's low risk to burning. However, it doesn't have all the capabilities and functions I want in a house. I think a rough analogy, the same side of like, where do you introduce acceptable risk into your systems? And not just for cyber attacks, but failure, right? Pace planning in the emergency management community is critical. We want primary, secondary, or primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. We want all of those things, but some of these technology systems don't have that, and that's okay. So it's I think in the risk bucket, I think it's important to talk about that as well. And then to your first point, which I think is the one we should probably chat about a little more, is how do we use it, right? How do we take the mundane administrative tasks that really eat up a good portion of the day and leverage some of the technology to offload that? So some specifics, right? Every emergency manager, no matter if federal, state, or local, spends part of their day reviewing plans, writing plans, assessing plans. Someone or some portion of your day at some point is exercise design development. You're writing master scenario event lists, you're writing injects, you're doing all of these things. And from my experience, and this is just individual, leveraging some of these large language models to offload some of the more repetitive administrative tasks frees up time to do more thinking, more analysis, more human interaction. So I think there's a balance where, and I don't know how much you've played with this, so I don't want to suppose anything, but you could ask any one of these large language models, go generate an exercise that says, a train derailed and tell me all the things. It'll be okay, mildly accurate. But just like anything else, if you give it more detail, it will give you a better product. So last thing I'll say, and come back with some more questions, is if you think about this, when we were junior in our careers, right, our accuracy rate was probably 60, 70% on any given product that we developed or anything. And then you get yelled at a little bit and someone would refine it. And then, the senior person would grab you and be like, hey, dummy, come here. This is the right way to do it. That training still needs to happen as well, and people need to grow. But I think there's this juxtaposition where people expect a computer to be so much better and more accurate. They want 100% accuracy every single time they put something in a computer. Whereas if we give it to our teams, sometimes you don't get that accuracy level. So a lot to say that, and I'll land on this, is I saw somewhere where it said, if they could go back and rename artificial intelligence, it should be intelligence augmentation instead of artificial intelligence. And that would get people to accept it a little more. Just know what you're using. Go into it with an open mind. I'm not suggesting that I'm all bought in on AI completely. It's just there are many capabilities that can really build capacity in the EM space.
Two things of that. One is unfortunate, this is the way we are, that we name things a lot of times after science fiction, right? A robot, was created. The name a robot was created in science fiction, right? But we still use it today. Same thing with AI, as far as that goes. Now I'll tell you an example of how I've used it. I've used AI, or actually, language model, to have a conversation, because think about this, right? I think of these language models as being the really smart person in the room, the researcher that could have every piece of like an encyclopedia in their head, right? Yep. Exactly what it is. And so I was looking at gap analysis on things. I use it for this conversation I was saying of what ifs, right? What if this occurred? What would be the worst case scenario? And it kind of busted my assumptions on some things when I was doing it that way. And I went, oh, okay, I didn't think of it this way. And then having that, then you have that conversation with real humans, and say, look, this is what I learned. This is what this said. What do you think of this? And so when we're looking at assumptions when it comes to what I was looking at specifically was drone attacks on large crowds, right? What would happen if this happened? What would happen if this happened? What's our likelihood of patient count? What's our likelihood of true impact? And so obviously you can't test that in real life, but you can test that in the AI environment. And that's kind of what I'm saying. That we can really embrace the idea of using AI as a learning tool, not as a crutch necessarily, or as a replacement for things. So I think that's really important. So I just wanted to kind of lay that
Yeah,
out.
and I totally agree in the brainstorming space, right? Hey, try this out, give me some thoughts, generate some ideas. One of the things I've noticed is, you know, in any emergency manager's probably things, you have all these ideas running around your head, right? And you just either like, I literally have a whiteboard in my office because I draw out on whiteboards. I start using some of the tools now just to brainstorm ideas, right? And just I don't want to waste anyone's time, so I'm using my own time and a model just to talk through some things. So that's benefit one. The other thing is, if you think back to, I'm picking operations center, you've got a situational awareness unit or planning section is crunching all of this data, and it's humans doing the number crunching. Uh, there are models that are out there today readily available that do that crunching for you to offset the cognitive load that the human is taking on, and then you can actually have the human do the analysis behind it, right? So think about it from the predictive perspective, not just sort of forecasting, which is amazing, and we could talk all about the advancements in forecast that we've had through AI, but situational awareness, planning, vulnerability assessments, all these things where it's like you have to spend hundreds of hours poring over documentation. Now, some of these systems can do the analysis, you can look at it, and then have the more informed conversation, the better advanced, what ifs, and then actually do the planning and put people into the human part where you have to make the actual decisions.
I'll tell one more case where we're using AI is when we're doing our situational awareness products coming out of the EOC. We were able to take all of the inputs for a certain period of time that's going into our incident management software, take that and then just say, hey, put this in chronological order of events, and get rid of duplicates and blah blah blah. So it's able, and it spits out a product, because we're doing them in some cases every hour on the hour, able to spit out a situational awareness document the way we want it in our format,
Yep.
the way we set it up before we started this entire activation, in the boxes where it's supposed to go, with a narrative at the bottom of it, and that we can get this out there, and you can get that to your decision makers pretty quick, of saying, this is what's happening, this is where we're at, this is read it, obviously look for anything that looks out of, you have to put a human eyes on it, you don't just paste that and put it out there. But it saved so much time for having a situational unit leader or team cut, look, take things, so it, like this, now you have a product that you can take a look at.
And I'll tell you, sorry, I was just gonna say, so I totally agree, and that's great. One of the benefits of being part of Aspen is getting to go to conferences outside the emergency management space, right? Some of these tech conferences and some of the broader discussions about AI adoption, and the things we're talking about, we're amazed by it, right? Because you would sit in an EOC and just crunch and crunch and crunch. When you talk to tech industry, you were talking before about sci-fi movies. One of my favorite references, but is in Frozen, when they meet Olaf and he's like, like, when we're talking about this, we're amazed by how quickly this is. You talk to some of the hyperscaler tech companies, they're like, that's great. That's not even scratching the surface of some of this capability. So that's the whole idea of, like, we know the challenges all the time that face emergency managers. You get crushed on this, crushed on that. This is always like, I got it. There is technology out there. It's drawing the tech companies to the EM community and say, don't just design something that you think works, but listen to what we're talking about. Listen to the challenges we're highlighting. But also, emergency managers have to acknowledge we don't always have to do things the same exact way, right? There is an opportunity when we transition from T cards to Blue Force trackers, right? There are ways where technology can be adopted responsibly and intelligently, and a human in the loop, and all the right words and policies and governance, all these things. But it's okay for us to say, maybe somebody did figure out a thing that's going to make this a little bit better for us.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, go back to T cards. Um, you know, we have people now that are in our world that don't even know what a T card is.
Yeah.
And and I was like, well, it's virtually, it's a physical portion of this. And they're, oh, okay, and they get it. So I think it's going to be at some point, right, in our down the road here in emergency management, we're going to have people that are like, what is a pen and paper? Like, what does this mean? Why are we doing it this way? Why did we ever do it this way? Because the technology is going to catch up. Now, that being said, I will die on this hill that we do need to, create thinkers and people who understand what the old way was,
Yeah.
so that they can put this information into the computers to make sure it's doing the right thing. So this old school stuff that people make fun of us for is critical for them to learn as well. So our training has to catch up, not catch up. Our training has to stay, but it be able to catch up with AI so we can do both worlds.
Oh, you have a partner on that hill, my friend. And this is a huge struggle that I have individually, but we have as an organization and emergency management as a practice of how do you make sure you still have a entry level pipeline, an apprentice pipeline from all the things that we were taught throughout our career, and making sure that we're teaching junior folks as they're coming up. But it's the same. Somebody used the analogy of like farming, right? Everyone in the United States in the 1800s knew how to farm. Nowadays not everybody knows how to farm because you don't need to anymore. So it's this balance, and I haven't found it yet, admittedly, for myself, of where do you say there's a newer, better, faster, more efficient way to do something while acknowledging, one, particularly given our profession, it might fail and we have to plan for it to fail, and then how do you work your way backwards while still growing a whole generation of pure EMs that know how to leverage the technology. And the last thing I would say on this is, when I first joined the emergency management community, I was working on Capitol Hill on 9/11, responded to the Pentagon, worked on the legislation that created DHS. That was like my first foray into what is now emergency management. And everybody that was in that space at that time was a former this, that, right? It was a firefighter, police officer, military. This is emergency management is not that, right? There is a response phase, of course, but it's community planners, it's mitigators, it's preparedness experts. And obviously anyone listening to this podcast is probably in agreement, but most people don't think that way. So I think it's really important to look at the tools and capabilities as well as the backgrounds of people that we want to bring into this space and say, hey, maybe leverage technology a little more, maybe have a chief innovation officer, have a user experience officer, someone who is really focused on using the right tech for the right job to get to that right outcome.
Absolutely. I'm on the downward slide of my career. I say this all the time. There's people that are coming behind us. What I find is really interesting is the guys that are and gals that are on my side of the career are that are embracing the AI, embracing large language models, that are embracing the mechanical thinking, if you will, right? Really are the departments that have some really cool innovation that's happening in emergency management. And I want to kind of put this out to you, because since you've been around the country here looking at things, where are we seeing growth in the embracement of AI, in the embracement of this technology, and you don't have to out people, and where are we seeing people the areas that are resisting this, and do you see a difference in how they respond?
Yeah. Yes, there is. And I think if I were putting it at two ends of the spectrum, I think what you would expect to see is, or what we are seeing is what you might expect to see. Some of the bigger, well-resourced jurisdictions have embraced some of the technology that we're talking about. Large language models, certainly the predictive analytics and forecasting capabilities, drones. So you see that. I was also surprised by some of the larger jurisdictions that aren't, for a variety of reasons. And we're asking, again, not that the summit's going to be the end all be all, but the start of the conversation, trying to bring some of the larger, well-resourced jurisdictions together to talk about why they are using certain AI technology and why they're not. But the other end of the spectrum is where you generally see smaller, not always rural, but smaller rural, under-resourced emergency management organizations, half a person to 1.5 people. There's actually a bigger benefit and a higher use of specifically around the AI models or LLMs where they're allowed to use it. So any number of the things we've talked about, one person can expand capacity by getting on a system and prompting correctly and reviewing correctly and doing all these things. Part of it has to do with whether they're allowed to. So,
Right.
the guidance has not, the technology has certainly outpaced any guidance process, governance, or alike. So some people are using it on their home systems, and being careful about not putting any non-public information, but just training yourself how to use it. So all of that to say that there's definitely a sliding scale, and I would think the sort of the middle of that is the medium-sized jurisdictions that just don't know what they want to do with AI. So just like when you're solving or trying to stabilize a disaster, what we're encouraging, think about the objective first. Don't just go buy a system. Don't just open up the pipeline to a particular product. What objective are you trying to achieve? What tasks are you looking to maybe offload? What are things that are repetitive and systematic that play well into a language model? Then build the capacity around that. And that's where you'll start to see, I think, a higher level of adoption, because also the naysayers or the folks who have just much lower risk appetite, they'll see some wins, or you'll know what your failures are.
Yeah.
So I think all in all, it was surprising to me. A couple of things were surprising. One, there's not necessarily a gap in product. There's a lot of product out there.
Mhm.
There's some, and I know you're familiar with them, some companies that are really expanding in the space of targeting emergency management AI adoption, mostly in the preparedness and exercise space, and that's great, and that's happening already. But the tools are out there. It's the barrier to buy, the barrier to train, and the barrier to really adopt.
I was looking down, and well, if you guys saw me looking down that are watching, read Jessica Jensen's research here, and they identified 1,179 AI-enabled products from 717 companies. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yep.
There's a ton of stuff out there. There's going to be something that's going to help you. And Jeremy, thanks for answering the question the way you did. I didn't want you to out any specific organizations, but my assumption was that the smaller, one person, half person shops were embracing AI a little bit more because it does help them go through a lot of things faster. And that was kind of my guess at it. And I didn't know. Thanks for kind of validating my assumption on that.
Yeah.
I know we're getting here close to the end of the conversation here, and there's so much more that we can speak about on this for sure. But at the end of the day, what is the goal of this project? What is the goal with Merkle? What do you see the end of the bridge, if you will?
So answering your last question first, I don't know if there's an end of the bridge. I think it's an arc, right? It's a desire to continue the cross-sector conversation about AI adoption in emergency management. It's to bring together the practitioners and the academics and the tech companies that I talked about, where it's happening in silos, and that's all good and progress being made, but it's running in parallel. So it's the desire of the AIDE initiative to bring all of that together. Part one. Part two, as we've talked about, and you've seen in some of the other reports that have come out, trying to jumpstart this conversation. I don't want to be in yet another room where someone says AI and people have this visceral reaction, positive or negative. Like, let's talk about from a practical perspective, how, when done responsibly, in the right place at the right time with the right tools, how does this work? And I won't list them because I'll run out of numbers, but like the next one, as we've talked about, is generationally, and not by age, but generationally by practice. How does the emergency management community grow? How do we go from where we were analyzing and using notebooks and T cards to the next level of adoption? But the interesting thing for me is the speed in which and scale in which AI is moving is faster than any other technology I've ever seen.
Mm.
Right. I think the closest, at least in my time, was probably the adoption of geospatial capability. We
Wow.
went from, I use the example during Hurricane Sandy, I was with DOT, but I was at FEMA's NRCC, and I had a printed map of the New York City subway system and the PATH trains, and I was holding them up, and I was hoping the scales would be right. And now you can interact with any geospatial system you want to, and interrogate it down to, a quarter meter, whatever you need. So I think it's generationally, how do we accept and adopt this new technology that's moving so much faster than anything we've ever seen, while acknowledging the risks, the redundancies that we need in the EM space. And then lastly, I won't go back through all the other parts of the initiative, but can we fund research that's going to drive people to spend a little bit of money and time in making this better? Can we continue to have some convening body where someone says, hey, I need this training, right? You talked about going to the education delivery. Hey, we need this. The team that's putting it together, led by Jess, like they started soliciting opportunities to do education training. The demand signal far outpaces our supply right now, and we know that. So there's an appetite for it. So how do we get into the space and make it an intelligent, informed conversation? Not just I love or hate AI, but practically how does it build capacity for emergency managers?
Absolutely. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time today. This conversation is not over by a long shot. This is our first jump into this. At IEM, I hope that you can find a home here to be able to have that conversation. I'd love to be part of that conversation going into next year. And, let's do this again soon.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, this was an awesome discussion. Thank you for having me on. The last plug at the end for anybody who is listening and wants to know more, AIDEinitiative.org is where you can find the reports. You can find information about the summit. If you're an emergency manager who's listening to this and you're intrigued and you want to join us at the summit, please drop a note into the website and let us know. I want to make sure that the industry is well represented when we have everyone in the room talking about where we're going to take this initiative as we move into year 2.
Absolutely. And everybody, that information will be in the show notes on Substack. So you can just go ahead and click on those things. We'll make sure, Jeremy, if you can send me all the links that you need in that, they'll be there. All right.
Absolutely.
And as always, everybody, please stay safe and stay hydrated.
Coffee stain badge on a lanyard string. Hotel ballroom buzzing, fluorescent wings.